Did you know Human Fall Flat is in the top 10 best-selling games of all time?
It's that time once again to pay the bills and talk about how Fortnite is f***ing garbage. Viral video games, titles that get spread around faster than smallpox and are inescapable when it comes to the world's public consciousness. I've talked about viral video games in the past, but that was centuries ago in internet time, and there are plenty of new games we can talk about to warrant a revisit to this topic. I consider a game to be viral if it had a surge of popularity for a week, month, or year, but is seldom talked about nowadays. Whether it be because an influencer highlighted it or it had a strong marketing campaign and online presence, these games hit it very big for one reason or another, and it's my job today to see if they're still hot shit or just a passing fad. So enough dawdling, let's take a look at a handful of the most popular games of all time and find out why they made their mark in more ways than one, alongside seeing if there's still any merit to revisiting them today. Trombone Champ is a rhythm game where you, shockingly, play music on the trombone. I'm more of a trumpet guy personally, but I think I could still make this work. The game was developed by Holy Wow Studios and was released in 2022 after a 4-year-long development time to much acclaim. As a certified rhythm game fan who is absolutely trash at them, this game always caught my attention, mostly for its simplistic gameplay and incredibly comedic style. The gameplay is similar to other rhythm games like Guitar Hero or Wii Music, wherein you move your mouse to adjust the pitch of your notes alongside clicking or pressing the keys on the keyboard to the timing of said notes in order to achieve a high score at the end of each song. The game does have a console port, but I stuck with the PC version for this one because I feel like the mouse and keyboard setup works much better for what the game is asking from you. While most rhythm games will challenge you with increasingly difficult and fast-paced tracks that you have to try over and over again to get a full clear on, this game is different because it's a total shitpost that doesn't take itself too seriously. But that's what makes it enjoyable for me. This isn't a game you play to get good at, you play it when you need a laugh, and I think Trombone Champ delivers in that regard with its charming trombone covers of dozens of iconic public domain musical pieces and overall quirky writing style and presentation. The game does slightly run the risk of the joke becoming stale over time, but for the hour or so that I played it, I had a pretty good time. And that's not even diving into the various DLC packs containing music from a handful of big-name indie games, the countless mods people have created for the game, or the fact that the game has Steam Workshop support which provides you with an endless amount of songs to play along to. It even has a track editor if you want to get really in-depth with the trombone cover of your dreams. Overall, I think Trombone Champ is a pretty good time if the game's comedy is to your liking, and I would highly recommend it for some simple and carefree rhythm game enjoyment. Moving on to Uma Musume Pretty Derby.
I am getting way out of my depth here.
A free-to-play sports simulation gacha game hybrid wherein you train anime horse girls to compete in a series of races to become champion, and help said horse girls reach their hopes and dreams.
My therapist isn't returning my calls.
Developed by Psy Games, known primarily for other gacha games like Grand Blue Fantasy and Dragalia Lost, my beloved, the game was originally meant to be released for mobile devices in late 2018, but kept getting pushed back until February 2021, with an English and PC release following 4 years later in June 2025. Uma Musume is a media juggernaut in Japan, with several anime adaptations, manga serializations, and live events for this one game alone. I first heard about Uma Musume way back in 2018 when the first season of the anime came out, and I thought the premise was dumb. I'm very picky when it comes to my anime preferences because I don't want to waste time on something I know I won't enjoy, and the concept of anime horse girls racing and performing idol songs just seemed stupid to me. To be fair, this was back when I was in high school and was still pretending to be a pretentious asshole that was trying to hide the embarrassing amount of Sonic the Hedgehog trivia I knew. But regardless, Uma Musume was something I heavily ignored when it first debuted. Flash forward to 2025 with the game's English release, and now the franchise is impossible to escape from. Everyone was playing this game when it launched, and it still kept up its popularity to this day. So fine, I guess I'll give it a shot. I'd like to think I'm a little more open to trying out new things nowadays, so who knows, maybe I'll actually end up liking this game. Uma Musume's main claim to fame is the career mode, wherein you mentor over the horse girl of your dreams and train up their skills and attributes to allow them to dominate over the competition and races. It's kind of like a roguelite where you can build up your horse girls however you see fit, and their successes or failures can help to inspire and buff future girls in their career runs to hopefully improve their overall chances of victory. I do quite enjoy the sense of progression you gain in training up your horse girl. You have the freedom to build them up however you see fit, though each girl will have stats they're naturally more proficient in, and I'd be lying if I said it wasn't a little exciting to see your recruit do well in races. I think the game can be a little chatty at points since you also have support cards that present sub-stories running parallel to your girl's career path, but that's what the skip button is for, you heartless monster. So, confession time. I ended up playing this game a lot longer than I really needed to. Part of that is because career runs can take a little while to complete, but also because the game stuck its claws in me and got me engrossed with everything else that it has to offer. From each individual character's short stories that help to better establish their personalities, to each individual piece of flavor text as well. You can really tell the developers absolutely love working on this game. And one aspect that I really like as well is that nearly every character is inspired by a real-life Japanese racehorse, with their nationality and personality being shared between their fictional and real-life counterparts. That is a lot of dedication for a silly mobile game, but one that helps to make Uma Musume stand out in a sea of other low-budget mobile game trash. My only small gripes mostly have to do with the aforementioned chattiness in most career runs, the game's PC UI being a little ugly to look at, and the game's general core identity of being a gacha game. Now, I didn't spend too much time pulling for characters, but from looking and asking around a bit, the game does seem to be a little stingy with free currency to pull characters and support cards, so that is something I think you should take note of in case you don't want to wail for the horse girl of your dreams. All in all though, Uma Musume was a very pleasant surprise, and it might just be one of the better gacha games I've played. Now on a completely unrelated note, we have Genshin Impact, a free-to-play open-world action RPG gacha game developed by Chinese game developer miHoYo. Genshin released worldwide in September of 2020 and garnered a lot of attention, both for good and for ill. Before the game even released, it was heavily criticized for its similarities to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild for obvious reasons. And then there was the whole discussion about the game's gacha elements and monetization methods. I've never played Genshin prior to now, but I was also pretty apprehensive about it when it was first making the rounds. I thought the game's combat looked bare bones, its monetization predatory, and its overall lack of creativity appalling. Now that I've played a bit of it for myself, yeah, all those points pretty much stand. Genshin Impact has you play as one of two world-crossing twins named Ether and Lumen, though you're free to name them whatever you wish. After being separated from your twin, you wake up in the world of Tava, where you rescue an annoying fairy thing named Paimon and begin your quest to find your sibling and possibly return home. Right off the bat, Genshin has a show don't tell problem in that it likes to shower you in exposition in a very ham-fisted and clunky way. You're a traveler from another world who got sent here because some god lady trapped your sibling in cubes. Oh look, here's your best friend Paimon. She's so cool and marketable and definitely not annoying as hell. It tries to set stuff up very quickly, but doesn't give scenes a lot of time to breathe or build up character relations naturally. The entire prologue of the game just feels like it's on autopilot the whole time, and as a whole, I just feel like the game could do a much better job at conveying a lot of the core information you need to get invested in your quest. Well, onto the gameplay, and yep, it sure is Breath of the Wild. You attack enemies, dodge, climb, swim, glide, in a world where Nintendo cease and desists anything and everything that even slightly resembles their intellectual properties. It's weird a game as big as this one snuck by without any consequence given how blatant its inspiration is. Now this used to bother me a lot, but I don't mind as much anymore whether or not Genshin Impact is a ripoff. I mean, it still obviously bothers me a little bit, but I've grown to be slightly more accepting of it. Art is inspired and built off of other art. That's how it's always been since the dawn of man. So Genshin very clearly building off what Breath of the Wild established isn't this massive blight on the gaming industry or whatever. What I mostly care about is whether or not Genshin can build upon Zelda's concepts in order to create something that's truly special on its own merits. And unfortunately, I don't think Genshin does anything to create something special on its own merits. The gameplay is basic and generic, the voice acting is bland and lifeless, and the game doesn't give me any reason to care about anything that's going on in the story or world at large. Unlike Breath of the Wild where the story fades away into the background to allow you to do whatever you want, here characters are constantly yapping your ear off, telling you where to go and what to do, and it is so goddamn draining. Unlike Zelda where I see a destination over the horizon and get excited to see what's over there, here I'm just begrudgingly going from place to place with not much to see or do in the meantime. Now a lot of my gripes so far have been primarily targeting the game's early hours, and I'm sure that the more time you put into it, the more open and freeing it becomes. But my problem is a game like this needs to hook you in early, and I was just not vibing with anything I was seeing on screen. And sure, I'm going in with a slight bias against the game, but I try to remain open-minded and sincerely engage with it, but it just didn't do anything for me. God, this isn't even diving into the game's gacha elements, which you can just tell are specifically designed to gatekeep you later in the game to get you to spend your hard-earned cash in order to progress. At least with Uma Musume, you really only have to engage with the gachas if you have a favorite character you want to pull for. Here, you can tell that the newer characters are power crept to all hell compared to the handful of schmucks you're given for free. Well, that's Genshin Impact, and overall, not a fan. There's just so much about this game that irks me, and it's something I don't really ever want to touch again. I'm sure I pissed off a lot of Genshin fans, so I'll reiterate that a lot of my criticisms are directed primarily towards the game's prologue, so who knows, maybe there's parts of the game I might actually enjoy later on. I'm quite a big fan of Final Fantasy XIV, and that game notoriously has an incredibly slow opening, but it still ended up becoming one of my favorite games of all time. So who knows, maybe if I give Genshin Impact another chance, I'll see something I didn't see the first time. And hey, if Genshin didn't hook me, maybe MiHoYo's other games will do the trick. Like Honkai Impact 3rd, it's like Bayonetta, but it's a shitty gacha game. Or Zenless Zone Zero, it's like Devil May Cry, but it's a shitty gacha game. Or Honkai Star Rail, it's like Persona 5, but it's a shitty gacha game before Persona 5 made a shitty gacha game.
Please stop.
While we're on the topic of popular games ripping off Nintendo, let's give Palworld a shot. Have you ever wanted to beat a Pokemon to death with a stick? Well, this is the game for you. Palworld is a sandbox survival / monster tamer game that blatantly borrows mechanics and creature designs from Pokemon, so much so that the Pokemon Company even filed lawsuits against the game's developer Pocket Pair over patent infringement, with most of them being rejected in February 2025. Now, I like Pokemon, but I don't love Pokemon. I fully understand why it's the biggest media franchise on the planet, but I think it has some serious innovation and core design problems that hold the newer game releases back in terms of scale and scope. Turning it into a crappy survival game is not how you innovate on the formula. I didn't play much of this because I really didn't enjoy my time with it. Palworld takes all of the worst aspects of every survival game from the past decade and shoehorns Pokemon to the core structure to try and give it some unique hook to distract from the fact that it's got nothing else going on for it. The game looks bad, isn't fun, and is very tonally inconsistent given how these cute and cuddly creatures are capable of carrying firearms. I never want to play this again. But hey, it's still in early access, so they'll definitely iron out some of the kinks eventually.
I've been saying that since I graduated high school.
Moving on to Doki Doki Literature Club. This is the one where you can play as Toad, right? Now this is what I'm talking about. A fun and charming visual novel with great writing, characters, and presentation. The game revolves around your player character being invited to your school's literature club by your best friend Sayori, and you just spend your days reading and writing poems and books while getting to better know the other club members like Natsuki, Yuri, and Monika. This game is just so incredibly charming and engaging. I'm not a massive visual novel guy, but I can appreciate when one does something right, and DDLC is definitely checking those boxes for me.
Even though I only played DDLC for about an hour and a half, I really enjoyed my time with it, and I'd love to play some more when I get the chance. Sorry, it's a what game?
Let's move on to Vampire Survivors.
Jesus Christ!
Vampire Survivors is a roguelike shoot-'em-up hybrid where you see how long you can survive a never-ending onslaught of enemies, while progressively getting more and more powerful until you can become an unstoppable killing machine. I like this one. It's incredibly simple, but also infinitely replayable, and when everything perfectly falls into place, you feel invincible. The game's creator, Luca Galante, had previously worked in the gambling industry, so that explains why the game's sound design and visuals are so good at encouraging you to keep playing and improve your runs. I've played this a couple times with friends in the past, but never really got the appeal beyond seeing a billion enemies on screen. But after really sitting down with it and giving it some attention, I fully get the hype behind it now. I'm definitely going to come back to this one eventually. As for another game similar to Vampire Survivors, we have Balatro. I'm going to keep my thoughts on this brief because I have intentions to go a little more in depth on it. Hopefully sooner rather than later, but we'll see. Anyway, Balatro is a deck building game developed by local Thunk, wherein you select a deck of cards and attempt to earn enough poker chips in increasingly difficult rounds by playing poker hands and using joker cards to increase your overall score and multipliers. Like Vampire Survivors, this game is incredibly addicting, and one I really should have gone to sooner given how inescapable the game was at release. It was so big that it was even nominated for Game of the Year, which is just crazy to me. A solo developed deck building card game standing side by side with industry giants like Elden Ring and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. That is insanely impressive. But beyond its simple and addicting gameplay, I don't really have much more to say about Balatro. It's just an incredibly fun, incredibly engaging game, and you're doing yourself a massive disservice if you haven't given it a shot yet. And to wrap things up, let's take a quick look at some of the games I covered previously to see how well they've held up over the years. Most of the games I covered last time were online games, and they've definitely had a lot of updates since I last covered them, so I think there's enough to warrant a quick revisit. Apex Legends and PUBG are the games I spent the least amount of time going back to. Apex has pretty much fallen off the public consciousness given how everyone just wants Titanfall 3 already, and PUBG is almost impressive in how it feels like nothing about it has changed since I last played it. I spent an entire game just riding around on a bicycle and still somehow got top 5. Among Us has gone through quite a number of changes, most notably adding specialized roles to the game that can greatly change how matches can play out, but it's also not nearly as popular as it was during its peak, so it's kind of tough to set up a game with friends now. And to conclude everything, let's talk about Fall Guys and Fortnite. Fall Guys was a very fun... Wait, that's not right. Fall Guys was a very fun platformer battle royale hybrid that I spoke very fondly of when I talked about it last. The gameplay was simple but easy to pick up and play, and matches were short enough to make it very replayable. Since it launched in 2020, it's gone through a lot of changes, many of which I have thoughts on. The biggest developments Fall Guys has faced post-launch relate to the game's developer Mediatonic being bought by Epic Games in March 2021, alongside the entire game going free-to-play a little over 1 year later in June 2022. These decisions killed the game. Okay, well, going free to play was definitely the right move in the long term, but ever since Epic took over in 2021, I don't think it's that much of a hot take to say that Fall Guys has struggled for relevancy compared to the massive phenomenon it was back in 2020. Making the game free to play meant they had to shove microtransactions into just about every aspect of the overall package, removing crowns as a currency in favor of battle passes and show bucks. Oh, goody. Look, I get that the devs need to be paid, but I feel like there had to have been a better middle ground between making cosmetics that you would actually want being actually obtainable, versus dangling cool stuff over the people who have zero control over their credit cards. Gameplay wise, Fall Guys is still mostly the same, but a few little quirks have cropped up here and there. Previously, level availability would get vaulted during a particular season, so if the new levels weren't to your liking, you would just have to suck it up until that season was over. And the introduction of creator-made levels into the game's core modes kind of ruined the enjoyment of the game for a little bit. Thankfully, a lot of those hurdles have mostly been fixed, but it hasn't changed the fact that Fall Guys has been on a slow decline for a number of years at this point. Mediatonic employees keep getting laid off over and over, and it feels like we're in the final stages of the game's existence, especially when it's been months since the game has received any major update. It's a shame too, because I still have quite a lot of fun with Fall Guys, but I'd be lying if I said the overall product was anywhere close to the game it was at launch. Regardless, I still like coming back to Fall Guys on occasion. I may not play it as much as I used to, but I do sincerely hope the game's future is bright. And lastly, we have Fortnite, the cultural juggernaut that is still going on to this day. Last time I talked about the game, we were at the beginning of Chapter 3, and I still cry myself to sleep every night over not buying that Spider-Man skin. Now we're in the middle of Chapter 7, and since then I've definitely played the game a little bit more. I've been playing the game on and off a lot more over the past couple of years, typically when the game crosses over with something I like, because FOMO is a bitch and 90% why this game is still in business. I genuinely believe that if Fortnite didn't try and collaborate with every media franchise under the sun, then it would have died a quick, painful death years ago, but that unfortunately isn't the world we're living in. Anyway, even though I've played the game a lot more since last speaking about it, I still hold the opinion that I don't really like Fortnite as an overall product. There have been some fun seasons, sure, but there's still so many aspects of this game that I don't enjoy. Like the aforementioned FOMO, particularly with Battle Pass exclusive skins, and the general gameplay still not being super engaging to me personally. They did add a zero build mode, so now you can play Fortnite like an actual video game, but I still feel like I spent half the match just walking around, barely interacting with anything. And my overall chances of victory still feel very dependent on whether or not I run into someone that's put 5,000 hours into the game. Now, a lot of those criticisms are directed towards the main Battle Royale mode, but since I've last talked about it, Fortnite has morphed into a games as a platform title, similar to something like Roblox. Epic went all in trying to turn Fortnite into this massive platform for creators to make anything and everything they wanted, and I think it's really backfired on them. The problem with trying to turn Fortnite into a games platform is that the game's core structure is just too limited to allow for any insane levels of creativity to occur. It's not like Roblox where creators are capable of pushing the game's engine to its absolute limits, to the point where you have to ask how something like this is even possible. Fortnite creative maps, in contrast, always feel limited by the game's core design, and because of Epic's insistence of wanting all creative maps to be playable on all platforms. So because of those limitations not allowing for creators to go all out, you get stuck with a bunch of garbage that Epic is forced to give millions of dollars towards because they're so desperate to make a failing system work instead of trying to make the core experience better. It's a shame too, because a lot of these creator-made levels can be really fun, but the overall enjoyment only lasts for a little bit, meaning it has about as much charm as the Halo Forge custom game and nothing much more. At the end of the day, while Fortnite is still mostly going strong, it's clear to see a lot of cracks forming in the foundation. Seasons have been really stale for quite a while now, Epic's insistence to make creative work is hurting them in the long term, and the company not listening to its fans as they constantly increase V-Buck prices while laying off thousands of developers in one fell swoop just make it feel like we're in the final stages of this game's relevancy. Now, I highly doubt Fortnite is actually going to go away anytime soon, but it's far from the cultural juggernaut that it was in its prime, especially when Epic keeps constantly making bad decisions that only serve to turn people away from the game. Nothing lasts forever, and if Fortnite keeps refusing to learn from its mistakes, then it's going to have to learn that lesson pretty badly. So there's another handful of viral games covered, and overall, I think this was a much better selection compared to last time. As the video game industry grows larger and larger every day, it becomes a lot harder for a hot new title to stand out when there's an endless treasure trove of other games that people can play instead. Because of that, the games that break out into the mainstream today tend to have some sort of innovative concept, gameplay mechanic, or addictive aspect to it that helps to make them constantly replayable or relevant in the public eye. It takes a lot for a game to succeed, much less become a mainstream phenomenon. And if the future of gaming is going to be like some of the games I was fairly fond of today, then I don't think I would mind looking at more viral games in the future.
Unfortunately, the MiHoYo fans didn't like me talking shit about Genshin, so they bypassed the kernel level anti-cheat that installs with the game, which is unironically a thing for some reason, to rob me of all my assets. So, it's time to take a look at the viral trend of homelessness.